Constantine returned 2 days later, climbing the wall with expert speed. Osrith first noticed that someone might be outside when two sparrows twittered away in annoyance at having been disturbed from their resting place. Constantine lifted a lean leg over the windowsill, bright winter sunlight shining on his black hair, his pale skin illuminated in the fierceness of its intensity. But it was still bitterly cold, and Osrith, though hot, pulled a boiled fleece around her shoulders. Constantine sat with his back to the window, his feet inside, and spoke to Osrith over at the bed. "Who came to the Christmas feast?" Osrith asked, feeling a vague disconnection to even Edra, as Constantine detailed the young adults in his court getting on well, with plans and hopes of their own. "Diffenwell came, and the Mormers," Constantine told her. "He was delighted to know of Owain, and Owain confided to me that he was pleased that his father had got on with him. He will be sending for him in the summer, to live at Glashku." "Will he come back?" Osrith asked. "I feel I did not get a chance to know him properly." She had guessed the answer, or rather Eswe had, but she wanted to see if Constantine would tell her anyway. "Did you notice how desperate Diffenwell was to keep you in Glashku?" Constantine told her, snowflakes catching in his long hair. "He believed your child was the last true heir to the Henoled, the old north of King Cole, but he is wrong. Eochaid had sanctions put upon him by Domhnall, one of which exile Osrith guessed, of his son, and she said as much to Constantine. "Just so," Constantine replied. "And he knows, too, that his own father is not Eochaid." Osrith said nothing. Hopefully the subject of Grioghair would not come up again. Instead, Osrith changed the subject. "And Enarod has a daughter?" Constantine laughed. "Osrith, will you let me tell the story?" He chuckled. "But yes. Her name was Angarad, and she gave her life when hers and Diffenwell's son was born. He did not know about him, and now Diffenwell has his heir. Now, I hope, he will act less irrationally as regards to the Norse in my traditional lands." "Are they getting on?" Osrith asked, noticing Constantine's eyes drifting over to young Finan again. "I believe so. Since you stopped Edra from going marauding in the woods with Ildub, he has found Owain a suitable scaperin in her place," Constantine explained. "Edra still goes fishing with them, Selak stands aloof, wishing he was young enough to join them, but trains hard with Malcolm." Osrith smiled. The next generation of Alba, all together, carefree, making bonds that would last a lifetime. "Malcolm looks like Domhnall," she told Constantine. Osrith had noticed the lithe, stocky young man in the courtyard one day, and had had to look twice, so resembled he his father. "And a princess of the Ulaid may be waiting for him," Constantine told her, "although it has been difficult with the unrest, and no Malmire to act as matchmaker. Malcolm needs to marry to secure Domhnall's bloodline, daughters of the King of Leitrim I am the process of securing for Ildub and Selak." None in England, Osrith thought, nor Gwynedd nor Hugh Bath. Not even Cornwalham, and Constantine had been patient, hoping the civil war amongst the Uineel may end and another generation born with, preferably, females. "It is a pity about Gormalath," Constantine continued. "2 sons, her husband shaming her, remarrying the other brother, disowned again, then wandering as a destitute beggar around Ulster. Diffenwell would have had her back in Strathclyde if he had known." Poor Gormalath, Osrith thought again, but then asked, 2 sons? "Oh yes," Constantine went on. "When Flansinna sent her to Sineal Mac and Chobar, his elder son married her. They were blessed with twins. The other brother fell in love with a girl of low status and married her, much to his father's disapproval." "So what happened to the sons?" Osrith asked. She knew the very end of Gormalath's story, with Neil Glundube, and her beginning now, thanks to Diffenwell, her brother. But this was a part of the girl's life Osrith had never heard of before. "Do they live? Are they with her at Dior?" Constantine shrugged. "Something happened with the low-born girl, she ran away, or perhaps died. Domhnall would know. The brother died too, or left somehow? Anyway," Constantine folded his arms, "Gormlath married the other brother, and bore him sons too." but he repudiated her because she was of the Uineel. Cineal began a rebellion, and Gormlaith was sent back to Flann, who arranged a match with the King of Munster. So that was the middle of Gormlaith's tale, which seemed even sadder than the end or the beginning. Then horror stole over her. These were the brothers who had attacked her, Nine Fingers and his brother. The sons? Osrith repeated, for something was clawing at her mind, trying to get her to listen. What happened to them? Have grown up as King Chobar's grandsons, as far as I know, Constantine told her. Cineal and Flann Sinnoh are no longer convivial. Cineal had begun to ally with the Norse and send them to the Uineel territory. There was plenty to choose from. Flann was sore to lose Dublin though. He broke off. You look pale, Osrith, Constantine told her, and moved closer to her, glancing at young Finan's crib. Do you have all you need? I have all I need. Except. Except. How was she to tell him? Except that she had no freedom now. She was here, keeping safe, with her son. Osrith was infinitely grateful that Constantine had provided for her. Yet, where was she around the Christmas table? Where were her eyes alighting onto the young princes, and Owain, who had travelled so far with them for the promise of a kingdom? I need to be your warrior again, Constantine, she told him, plainly. I need to have my sword in my hand and my seeks to my hip and fight for a cause I believe in. What do you believe in? He asked her, his pale blue-grey eyes picking at the micro-expressions on her face. Alba, she told him. The Gaelish and the Cymric kingdoms. That the Saxons and the Angles must remove expansionist ideas from their minds. That he needs a purpose to hold Bebbanburg, one with more will than Utad has to take it back. Constantine thought through her words again, and smiled, softly. It does my heart good to hear such passion, Osrith, he told her. Do you really wish to settle with my kinsman? Osrith flashed him a look. Was this a test? You offer me a man to settle for, she told him, and land in a place with which I am familiar. I will be absolutely content with that, she told him, but I must fulfill my years to Ethelfled. Nothing else will satisfy my soul. Then I can put aside my blades and bring forth life rather than take it. Constantine reached for her hands and Osrith allowed him to take them. Through the window snow began to spsp against the open shutters. Then, that is what you must do. Stay, until young Finan is old enough that you can bear to leave him, and then serve your time. He broke off, and put a finger to her lips. You do not have to make a decision about the marriage yet, either. You can wait until you return, and after that. He will still want to marry me? Osrith asked Constantine. The king nodded. Yes, Osrith, he will still want to marry you. And then the baby stirred, and began a ha-ha cry of a child in want of food, and Constantine moved away slowly towards the window, watching his woman pull open her dress and dangle a red, swollen nipple towards the mouth of his son. Constantine turned abruptly, and began the cold climb down to his own stable yard. 88,888,888. We met on the ship that took the Norse back to Irian, Osrith told Edra, as she relieved her mother of her little tiny bundle. Washed in boiled water, twice, Edra curled Finan close to her, and Osrith admitted, the image suited her adopted daughter. Anlaf was aboard, one of the Norse, and he mentioned that your father had invited him here. Edra shook her golden head, as young Finan opened his eyes and looked at her. I do not care, she told Osrith. I am content here. I can earn my keep, rather than marry him. Edra, I will not begin an argument now, Osrith told her. She was weary, and that morning her eyelids felt heavy. Elased had closed the shutters, but she would have liked them open once more. Listen to your father, at least meet the man. He was intelligent. He was good-looking. He is of your heritage. Part of my heritage, Mater, Edra told Osrith. Like you, part of me is Anglish, part of me is also Gaelish. All of that was true, but Osrith felt she couldn't put much of a sentence together. Edra, she said at last, when tiredness overcame her. Let me have little Finan back again, and you need to do something for me. Alarm registered on Edra's features. Osrith must have come across as very serious. for her daughter got to her feet. She placed the back of her hand on Osrith's forehead. "Mater, you are hot," Edra told her. Elasade said I needed to make sure I checked. "I will bring her." But before Osrith could protest, she was sick, bringing back all of the lovely fish Glimri had prepared for her. It was true, she had had a headache that morning, and was as hot as ever, but these feelings were accelerating quickly, and she laid back her head onto her pillow, panting. "Edra," Osrith said again. "You need to do something for me." At the back of the kitchens near the stores, Osrith was sick once more. "Open the shutters, Edra, please," she begged. And her daughter did, passing Osrith water before she sank back onto the bed. "Edra," Osrith managed, "near where I sleep, there is a stone which can be moved. Press by the stable side wall," she coughed. "Repeat back to me." "A stone, on the western side wall," Edra said, but Osrith caught her arm. "Stable side. Wrapped in leather and tied with a binding, are medicines I got from a healer in Mercia. Take them to Sula," she said, deliberately, making sure Edra heard her. "She's a healer, beyond Dunota's walls, I know you know what I mean." Osrith shouted. "She may want silver. There is silver in the wrap. Give everything to her." 88,888,888. Osrith awoke to noises around her. Light streamed in through the window and she felt cold. January was cold in Dunota, Domhnall had told Osrith, when she had shivered through her first one. "Osrith." She turned her head, and saw Elasade. Then a panic bit in her throat. "Fine and big." "Perfectly fine," she heard the old woman say, and then caught a whisper in the air of her talking to someone else. "The king has given you leave to remain," she insisted. There was someone else there. And Osrith vaguely remembered a crunching of leather and a clink of silver. 88,888,888. Some of these I have only ever heard about. Sula was sifting through the herbs forcibly purchased by Osrith by Ezith. "I do not have your words for what I think it is, childbed fever." Osrith was asleep, and young Finan fussing for food, so she encouraged Edra to hold the baby at his mother's breast to suck. Elasade groaned at the words. "It is as I feared." "Pack her with this fungus," she told Edra. "Do not use it all. Make a broth. Bring me back in 2 days." As Sula left, pushing on the outer door of the confinement room, she met the cold, blue-gray gaze of Constantine. "My king," Sula acknowledged, bowing her grey head and keeping tight the roll of leather in her hands as tightly as she could. "You will come back," Constantine demanded. "You will make her live." "I will do all I can," Sula reassured the king, placing a delicate hand on his shoulder. "The Morrigan is her close at hand, she has the will of a she-bear." 88,888,888. Is mother going to live? Edra. That was Edra. "We keep applying the fungus, as the healer told us." There was a pause and a thump of wood on wood. "Encourage as much of that as you can down her throat, Caligbeak." 88,888,888. And when Osrith was strong enough, and knew that young Finan was well, and had been eating dry bread and mash and had been taken out in the bright sunshine in Edra's arms, she got the strength together to get down 4 flights of narrow stairs in her own and, to Elasade's astonishment, accompanied young Finan in his daily outing. "He grows by the day," Edra said, delightedly. And Osrith requested a chamber with young Finan away from the confinement room, and her strength returned on Glimri's food and the joy she saw in her son thriving. The Mormers came to seek counsel or give it to Constantine, and that summer she spoke to Eswi, who had not recognized her in a dress with lengthening hair, and Phelim and Engus, who had both come to walk with her while young Finan found his feet. Saenid, Osrith learned, had been with you once on the east coast, for Harold Finehair threatened the shore, but had yet not been able to take hold of any land. And Owain came, and Dyfnwyl, and we heard that summer, her brother sailing his fleet up the Forth, nodding in greeting to the king of Alba, and plotted the reinforcement of Bibbenburg in exchange for a favourable to extend Constantine's fleet guard. and Finan grew, and delighted and enchanted everyone who met him, and Osrith forgot the feel of buoy in her hand and the still aliveness she got from sleeping out of doors after day-on-day riding. 88,888,888. It was a year later, almost to the day of the beginning of harvest, when Edra came running to find Osrith in absolute desolation the next summer, when young Finan could toddle walk around, and did so at every opportunity, to cry into her lap that Ildub had been drowned. He and Owain had been daying one another to swim between Dunnottar and Caldys, out playing as they had been, when a current had whipped him away, and he was dashed on the rocks on the southern bank. The monks at Caldys had brought out his body and taken it tenderly to his father, and Edra sobbed that she had seen it all. Owain was devastated beyond anything, and Dyfnwal came at Constantine's request to be with his son, and a month of mourning was placed upon Dunnottar. Osrith spent 2 months sleeping next to her daughter, with young Finan at her side, and Edra woke up screaming and crying, but these faded as time went on, until the night Edra told her she needed Osrith no longer. And that had been the day Anlaf Guthfrithson had arrived at Dunnottar with 2 of his men, and had charmed Edra into silence. Challenged by a stubborn Saenid, it took Osrith to identify the Norseman, and that took some doing, as it had been nearly 2 years before in the fog when she had last seen the man. But he was Anlaf, and he remembered their flight over the Irish Sea and remembered Owain, and it was the same summer when she had finally sought Constantine, and spent the night with him, doing nothing more than lie next to him. Osrith waited for him to talk about Ildub, but Constantine did not. He said little of anything to her, just lay next to her and held her hand. He was more concerned about Seluk's return from Domhnall at Doiaya, and the words he would have to find to be the father his eldest son needed him to be, he told Osrith. Another year passed, and they began to heal, as the summer brought glorious weather and fewer Norse than Constantine's Mormers imagined. Dyfnwal was in his element, teaching Owain all he could, with Seluk giving support to the future king of Strathclyde, and Osrith was pleased the prince had settled in his new home with his father, though Osrith guessed he must be missing his life and Gwynedd. Then came the time, neared the end of young Finan's 2nd year, when Mormers came with news that the Norse had begun to make permanent settlements in Northumbrian land. Wither visited, and suitably fussed Osrith's son, before meeting with Constantine, and then feasting with the lords, before strengthening the alliance between Alba and Bibbenberg by offering a place for a seaborne army fixed at Bibbenberg in exchange for southern defences beyond Eoferwick. It was the first time Osrith had heard the Norseman named Ragnall, but not the first with the name Sigtryggr. Constantine was leaving to ride south with Wigga. "We are going to make our claim to the wall loud and clear once again," he told Osrith. And Wigga's face came to light when he scooped up young Finan, and the boy babbled to him, pointing over the river, and giggled in delight when his uncle Wigga joked with him and tickled him, and Senid gave him a sword, and he swooshed it in the air to the delight of everybody. And 2 more years passed, and young Finan grew in the household of Constantine MacDualpin. And Osrith was happy. Reasonably happy. But her sword and seeks were idle in the armory, and she had to dare herself to find them and dare herself to make them battle-worthy. She had young Finan, who would copy the tales Edra told him, of elves and dragons and cities under blue seas, and she listened to her son as he managed in complete words to carry the same magical message to ears, to senses. When young Finan told a story, everyone was compelled by some hidden force to stop and to listen. And she kissed and loved Finan Beeg. For how could she bear to be apart from him for so long, and this was what she was giving up. Osrith had not trained, she was out of shape. Since the fever, she was more tired, and felt her age. And then one day, when young Finan was 4 years old and had been taken off that day with Edru and Seluk into the woods under strict instructions he was not to go off on his own, Osrith stood in the armory. She unlaced her dress, letting it fall to the cobbles and feeling the flesh of her body with her hands, ruined beyond original shape, and made a decision. Binding her breasts as tightly as she could manage, Osrith pulled on a pair of utility breeches, ones reserved for a guard when needed, and there was always a supply with the weapons. She found a shirt and jerkin and a pair of boots that were too big for her, then took up tagged seeks. Around her, strands of hair floated down to the floor. She was Osrith again. and she could now go with Eswi, and meet with the Mercen Guard. That was Constantine's request for her, of her time to be spent in his service. Finan be good be cared for, and Edra had agreed while Osrith was away that she would care for him. Anlaf had been agreed upon, and they were betrothed, but Constantine was not ready for his daughter to leave him yet. Then she pushed open the door of the armory and wakened a sleepy Sainid, who sat up at once as she stood before him. Constantine said he wanted to give me Bibbenberg as my bride price, she grumbled to Constantine's head guard. Sainid nodded in agreement. But I do not want it, she told him. Bibbenberg is nothing to me. Osrith watched as Sainid sat up, his long, black hair swinging to either side of his face. Nor do I want a marriage with the implication that I am in need of a father for young Finan, she added. But she was prepared to settle, for the sake of her son. And Osrith wondered that she had never seen Sainid properly before. His hands had touched her body after the day of her first battle, when she had impersonated Constantine, and yet to be mature feelings in her body had remembered his soft, lithe touch to her skin as he saw to her wounds, but Osrith remembered tender fingers on her body. He speaks of a lord, to whom I could marry, she told him. I am no lady, I want no dress, not ladies to whirl about me. I am a warrior, and if I cannot be a warrior, I can be a farmer. She sank down next to him. Can a lord want me, like this? Not a dress, but a sword? Sainid took her hand, in the same way as he used to, when she was small. I cannot marry him yet, I owe time to Mercia, in exchange for young Finan remaining safe here in Dunnottar. She turned a plaintive expression to Sainid, who took her other hand. Osrith, he said, softly, smiling softly. Can. Who is it, Sainid? Osrith cried, sighing deeply. I can never promise to love him, I can never promise to be a real wife to him. She trailed off, and settled into her gloom. Then, she was aware that he was stroking the backs of her hands with his thumbs. Can you not guess? Sainid asked gently, his face breaking into a smile. I could imagine no one else managing my family's estate. You? Osrith could hear the shock in her own voice. And, yet, she recalled Sainid once confessing that he had grown up by the sea, within sight of Lindisfarne. If you will, Osrith, he said, sinking to his knees beside her. I do not ask that you love me, or that you owe me anything, nor even that you will lie with me. Just that you accept my offer, turn your blade into a plowshare. But Osrith withdrew her hands, folding them together, fiddling with them. You are serious? She asked, softly. And then, Osrith could not imagine no one else. She could see herself being with Sainid for the rest of her days, working a farm, being at peace. Osrith had known him since she was 11 and trusted him more than she trusted anyone. So, why not? Osrith asked herself. Why not? She had said she would marry Finan, she reminded herself, she had told him so. Only when he came to her. Which might be tomorrow, or it might be never. It had been 4 years so far. Carefully, she took off the coin on its leather strip and folded it up and put it into her pocket. Osrith. Will you marry me? Sainid's voice brought her back to the present. What? Allow me to be your husband, share in my land. Sainid was still kneeling, still smiling. But Sainid placed a finger to her lips. You do not have to tell me now, he told her. I would not expect you to marry me until you had been to Mercia and served your time there. Mercia? She had to go to Mercia first. Osrith. Sainid continued. I have no expectations of you. If you are unhappy, it will not be of my doing. I will ask nothing of you, Osrith, the estate will be yours to manage as you see fit. Where is this land? Berwick, Sainid repeated. It wasn't because she hadn't heard that Osrith wanted him to repeat it, rather that she wanted to check. And her mind ran on to the tall cliffs with wide bays, blue-grey shallow sea. Constantine was clever. Too clever. By putting her next to Bibbenberg, he was placing her neither in Alba nor Northumbria, yet simultaneously in both. Osrith, I love you, Sainid said, at last. I have loved you from the moment I took you by the arm from that boat, just over there, and hauled you in front of King Impudent, stubborn, arrogant little bratling. You were. And you promised you would fight for him and for Alba? And you did. You did, Osrith. You are wrong, Osrith told him, her mind made up. Sainid's face betrayed confusion and he waited for her to continue. You are wrong, I do have to tell you now. Ask me again. Sainid did not hesitate and reached for her hands. Osrith, will you marry me? Yes, Sainid, Osrith replied, I will. I will marry you.